My Uber driver handed me his phone without saying a word. I looked down at the screen and my heart stopped. The text said, "You're in danger. Play along. Don't react." Before I could even process what I was reading, I heard all 4 doors lock at once. He looked at me in the rearview mirror with the most serious expression I'd ever seen and said just 2 words, "Trust me." 10 minutes later, when we finally stopped, I realized this stranger had just saved my life. My name is Rachel Torres. I'm 26 years old, and I work in marketing for a tech company here in Austin, Texas. I live by myself in a small apartment on the east side of town, about 20 minutes from downtown. My older sister Nina lives in Houston with her husband and their 2 kids. We talk on the phone almost every day, mostly complaining about work or laughing about our mom's latest attempts to set me up with someone from church. My parents, Maria and Carlos, still live in San Antonio where I grew up. My dad just retired from teaching high school, and my mom runs a small catering business out of their house. They worry about me all the time because I live alone in a big city, but I love my independence. I never thought that independence would almost get me killed. Before we go any further, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. This story is going to get intense, and I need you to stick with me until the end. Also, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know I'm not the only one out here trying to stay safe. It was a Friday night in early October, around 9:30. I had just left a happy hour with my coworkers at a bar downtown. We'd been celebrating because we just launched this huge marketing campaign I'd been working on for 3 months straight. Everyone was in a great mood, buying rounds of drinks, taking group photos, the whole celebration thing. I had 2 margaritas, not enough to be drunk or anything, but definitely enough that I didn't want to drive home. My car was still parked at the office, so I did what I always do. I pulled out my phone, opened the Uber app, and requested a ride. It had been one of those crazy work weeks where you barely have time to breathe. Late nights at the office, client calls that ran over, presentations that needed to be perfect. I was exhausted. All I wanted to do was get home, change into my pajamas, and watch whatever show I'd been ignoring all week. My coworkers kept trying to convince me to go to another bar with them, but I was done. I said goodbye to everyone, gave out a few hugs, and walked outside to wait for my ride. Downtown Austin on a Friday night is always packed. There were people everywhere, music blasting from the bars, groups of friends laughing and taking selfies, couples holding hands walking down the street. I stood under a streetlight scrolling through my phone, checking Instagram, replying to a text from Nina, asking how the happy hour went. Just normal Friday night stuff. Nothing felt wrong or dangerous or unusual. My Uber app showed that my driver, Marcus, was 3 minutes away in a gray Toyota Camry. I'd taken hundreds of Uber rides before this. It was part of my routine. I never thought twice about it. When the gray Camry pulled up to the curb, I checked the license plate against what the app showed me, just like I always do. It matched. I opened the back door and slid into the seat. "Rachel?" the driver asked, turning slightly to look at me. "Yeah, that's me," I said, pulling the seatbelt across my chest and clicking it in. He was probably in his early 50s, a black man with graying hair and kind eyes. He wore a plain button-down shirt and had one of those pine-scented air fresheners hanging from his rearview mirror. Everything about him seemed completely normal, safe, just another Uber driver doing his job on a Friday night. He pulled away from the curb smoothly and merged into the traffic on 6th Street. "How's your night going?" he asked. It was the usual small talk that Uber drivers make. "Pretty good. Just leaving a work thing. Ready to get home and crash on my couch." "I hear you," he said with a small smile. "Long week?" "The longest." We drove in comfortable silence for the next few minutes. I pulled out my phone and started checking my work emails, half paying attention to where we were going. We were heading east on 6th Street, which was the right direction toward my apartment. Everything felt totally normal and routine. Then I noticed something strange. Marcus kept looking in the rearview mirror, not at me, but at something behind us. His eyes would flick up to the mirror, stay there for a few seconds, then back to the road. His jaw was tight. His hands were gripping the steering wheel harder than they needed to be. I felt a small flutter of anxiety in my chest, but told myself I was being paranoid. I turned slightly in my seat and looked out the back window. There was a black SUV, a few cars behind us, but the streets were busy, so that didn't seem weird. Lots of cars were heading in the same direction. Then Marcus made a sudden right turn that definitely wasn't part of the route. My phone buzzed with a notification from the Uber app saying we were taking a different way, and it would add 3 minutes to my trip. Drivers do that sometimes to avoid traffic, so I didn't think too much about it. But something felt off. That's when Marcus reached back over his shoulder without saying anything and handed me his phone. The screen was already unlocked and open to his notes app. There was a message typed out in big capital letters. "You're in danger. Play along. Don't react." My whole body went cold. I stared at those words, reading them over and over, trying to understand what was happening. Was this real? Was he threatening me? Was this some kind of sick joke? My hand started shaking as I held his phone. I looked up and met his eyes in the rearview mirror. The look on his face told me this was not a joke. This was serious. This was real. Then I heard the sound that made my heart stop. Click, 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 click. All 4 car doors locked at the same time. "Trust me," Marcus said quietly, his voice calm but urgent. "I need you to act completely normal. Look at your phone and laugh like I just said something funny. Smile. Pretend we're having a regular conversation." Every single instinct in my body was screaming at me to panic, to demand he unlock the doors, to call 911, to do something. But there was something in his voice, something in the genuine fear I could see in his eyes that made me stop. Against every logical thought in my head, I forced myself to look down at my phone and let out a fake laugh. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. "Good," Marcus said, keeping his voice low and steady. "That's good. Now I need you to listen to me very carefully and stay calm. There's a black SUV that's been following us since the second you got in my car. When you climbed into my back seat, a man in the passenger seat of that SUV took a picture of my license plate. They've been staying exactly 3 cars behind us for the past 8 minutes. Every turn I make, they make the same turn." My stomach dropped like I was on a roller coaster. I wanted to turn around and look at the SUV, but before I could move, Marcus spoke again. "Don't look back. Keep your eyes on your phone. Act like you're texting someone." He made another turn onto a quiet residential street with big trees and houses with porch lights on. "I'm a retired police officer. I worked for Austin PD for 23 years. I know what it looks like when someone is being followed. And this is not just random traffic. Someone is following you, Rachel. And they've been following you since before you even got in my car." My mouth went completely dry. I could barely get the words out. "Following me? Why would anyone be following me? I don't understand." My voice came out as barely a whisper, shaky and scared. Marcus kept his eyes moving between the road ahead and the rearview mirror, his expression calm but focused like he was back on duty as a cop. "I don't know why, but I know what I'm seeing. This isn't coincidence. When you requested the ride, where exactly were you standing?" I tried to think back through the fog of panic filling my brain. "Outside the bar, under a streetlight on 6th Street. I was by myself." Marcus nodded slowly, like that confirmed something he'd been thinking. "Were your coworkers with you, or had they already gone back inside?" I had to think for a second. "They'd gone back in. I was alone on the sidewalk waiting for you." He made another turn, this time onto an even quieter street. Through the back window, I could see the black SUV make the exact same turn, keeping that same distance behind us. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode out of my chest. "Here's what I observed," Marcus said, his voice steady and professional like he was giving a police report. The black SUV pulled up to the curb about 30 seconds after I did. I noticed because they stopped in a no parking zone right behind my car. I thought maybe they were another Uber or Lyft, waiting for their passenger, but they didn't pick anyone up. They just sat there with their engine running. The second you got in my car and I pulled away, they pulled out and started following. That's when I knew something was wrong. I felt like I was going to throw up. Someone had been watching me, waiting for me, planning something. What do they want? What are they going to do? Marcus glanced at me in the mirror, and I could see he was trying to figure out how honest to be with me. I don't know their intentions, but I know this much. If someone is following you this deliberately, taking photos of the car you're in, matching every turn I make, they're not just curious. They have a plan, and that plan probably involved knowing where you were going. My brain suddenly clicked on something terrifying. My address. My home address is in the Uber app. They can see where I'm going. Marcus nodded. Exactly. Which is why I'm not taking you there. If they know where you live, and based on this level of planning, I'm guessing they do, that's the absolute last place you want to be right now. I'm taking you straight to the police station on 7th Street. It's public, it's well lit, and it's full of police officers. If they're really following you, they'll either back off when they realize where we're going, or we'll have plenty of witnesses and help. He made another quick turn, and I saw the SUV's headlights follow. Should I call 911 right now? I asked, already reaching for my phone with trembling hands. Not yet, Marcus said firmly. If you make that call and they're watching us closely, which I think they are, they might realize we're onto them. They might panic and do something dangerous while we're still on these quiet streets. Let's get closer to the station first. We're about 5 minutes away. I nodded, even though I felt like my whole world was spinning out of control. I couldn't wrap my mind around what was happening. Who would follow me? I was nobody special, just a regular person with a regular job. I wasn't involved in anything dangerous or illegal. I didn't have enemies. This had to be some kind of mistake. But then a memory hit me like a punch to the stomach. 3 weeks ago, I'd gone on 2 dates with a guy I met on a dating app. His name was Trevor. The first date had been normal. We got dinner at an Italian restaurant, talked about work and movies and the usual first date stuff. It was fine. Not amazing, but fine enough that I agreed to a second date. But that second date had felt different. Wrong. He'd asked so many personal questions. Specific questions. What was my exact address? What time did I usually leave for work in the morning? What time did I get home? Did I live alone or have roommates? Which grocery store did I shop at? Which gym did I go to? At the time, I'd felt uncomfortable, but told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe he was just trying to find common interests or plan future dates. But my gut kept telling me something was off. When he texted me after that second date asking when we could meet again, I'd politely told him I didn't think we were a good match. He'd responded with, "No problem, thanks for being honest." And that was it. I hadn't heard from him since. I thought it was over. I thought he'd moved on. But what if he hadn't? What if he'd been watching me this whole time? What if he'd been planning something and tonight was finally the night he decided to act? My hands started shaking even harder. "Marcus," I said, my voice cracking. "I think I might know who it is." Marcus's eyes locked onto mine in the rearview mirror, and his whole expression shifted to intense focus. "Tell me everything right now. Don't leave anything out." I took a shaky breath and started explaining as fast as I could. 3 weeks ago, I went on 2 dates with a guy I met on a dating app called Bumble. His name is Trevor. The first date seemed totally normal, just dinner and conversation, nothing weird. But the second date felt really off. He kept asking these super specific questions about my life, like exactly where my apartment was, not just the neighborhood, but the actual building. What time I left for work every morning, what time I usually got home at night. Did I live alone or have a roommate? Which grocery store I shopped at? Which gym I went to? At the time, I thought maybe he was just trying to figure out if we lived near each other or had similar routines, but it made me really uncomfortable. When he asked for a third date, I told him I wasn't interested. He seemed fine with it, just said no problem, and that was the last I heard from him. I paused, trying to remember any other details that might matter, but now that I think about it, about a week after I told him I wasn't interested, I could have sworn I saw his car in the parking lot at my gym, and maybe once near my office building. But I told myself I was being paranoid, that lots of people have similar cars, that it was just coincidence. Marcus's jaw tightened and he made another quick turn. The black SUV followed. "That's not paranoia, Rachel. That's your instincts trying to tell you something was wrong. Did you ever give him your home address directly?" I shook my head hard. "No, never. I met him at both restaurants. I drove myself and didn't let him pick me up or drop me off, but my job is listed on my LinkedIn profile with the company name. He could have looked that up and followed me from work to figure out where I live. The reality of what I was saying hit me like a truck. This guy had probably been watching me for weeks, learning my schedule, following me, waiting for the right moment. And tonight, when he saw me standing alone on that sidewalk waiting for an Uber, slightly tipsy from happy hour, he must have thought it was his chance. "Okay, here's what we're doing," Marcus said, and his voice had that commanding tone that made it clear he'd spent decades as a police officer. "I'm calling this in right now." He pulled his own phone out of a holder attached to his dashboard and used his car's Bluetooth system to make a call. Within 2 rings, someone answered. "This is Marcus Williams, retired Austin PD, badge number 4729. I need immediate assistance at the 7th Street Police Station. I'm currently driving a gray Toyota Camry, license plate JKL 5892, and I'm transporting a passenger who I believe is being actively stalked. We're being followed by a black SUV. I can't make out the full license plate from this distance, but I can confirm it's been tailing us for approximately 14 minutes now, through multiple turns. This is not random traffic. ETA to the station is 3 minutes." The dispatcher's voice came through the car speakers, calm and professional. "Copy that, Mr. Williams. I'm notifying officers at the 7th Street station right now. Are you or your passenger in immediate physical danger at this moment?" Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror at the SUV still following us. "Not immediate danger, but the situation is escalating. The subject has maintained visual contact and is matching our route exactly. We need officers ready when we arrive." The dispatcher responded quickly. "Understood. Officers will be waiting at the main entrance. Proceed directly to the station and do not stop for any reason." Marcus ended the call and looked at me in the mirror again. "Rachel, I need you to do something important right now. Text someone you trust. Your sister, your parents, a close friend. Tell them exactly what's happening and where you are. If something goes wrong, and I don't think it will, but if it does, I want someone to know your situation immediately." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my phone, but I managed to open my messages and pull up my conversation with Nina. I typed as fast as my trembling fingers would let me. "Nina, something bad is happening. I'm in an Uber heading to police station on 7th Street. Someone is following me in a black SUV. My driver is a retired cop and he's helping me. If you don't hear from me in 20 minutes, call the police. I love you." I hit send and watched the message show as delivered. Within 5 seconds, I saw the 3 dots appear showing Nina was typing. Then my phone started ringing with her name flashing on the screen. I answered and put it on speaker. "Nina, I'm okay right now. I'm safe. I'm with an Uber driver named Marcus, who used to be a police officer, and he's taking me straight to the police station." Nina's voice came through panicked and loud. "Rachel, what the hell is going on? Who's following you? Are you safe?" Marcus spoke up before I could answer. "Ma'am, this is Marcus Williams. Your sister is completely safe with me. We have strong reason to believe she's being followed by someone in a black SUV, possibly someone she knows. I'm taking her directly to the police station where officers are already being notified and will be waiting for us. She's going to be fine." I could hear Nina's husband in the background asking what was wrong. "Rachel, I'm getting my keys right now. I'm driving to Austin." Her voice was shaking. "Nina, just stay on the phone with me, okay? Don't hang up." We turned onto 7th Street, and I could see the police station up ahead. It was all lit up, bright and safe-looking. There were 2 patrol cars parked right out front with their lights on, and I could see at least 3 officers standing by the main entrance waiting for us. The sight of them made me want to cry with relief. The black SUV was still behind us, still following, still there. Marcus pulled into the police station parking lot and drove right up to the front entrance where the officers were standing. He stopped the car directly under the brightest lights. For a moment, everything felt like it was moving in slow motion. The black SUV slowed down as it passed the police station, and that's when I finally got a clear look at the driver's face. The streetlight lit up the inside of his car for just a couple of seconds, but it was enough. It was Trevor, the same guy from those 2 dates. His eyes met mine through the window, and in that brief moment, I saw something in his expression that terrified me. Anger, entitlement, like I'd done something wrong by rejecting him. Then he pressed on the gas and sped away down the street. My voice came out as barely a whisper. That was him. That was Trevor. Marcus was already out of the car before I could even process what had just happened. He was talking to the officers, pointing down the street in the direction Trevor had driven, giving them a description of the vehicle. One of the officers immediately got on his radio, and I could hear him calling in the information. Black Chevy Tahoe, heading south on 7th Street, possible stalking suspect, requesting units to locate and stop the vehicle. Another officer, a woman probably in her 30s, walked over to my door and opened it gently. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Hayes. You're safe now. Can you step out of the vehicle and come inside with me, please?" My legs felt like rubber when I stood up. Nina was still on the phone, and I could hear her yelling questions, asking if I was okay, saying she was already on the highway driving toward Austin. "Nina, I'm fine. I'm with the police now. I'll call you back in a few minutes, I promise." I hung up even though she was protesting, because I needed to focus on what was happening. Officer Hayes led me inside the police station and into a small room with a table and a few chairs. It looked exactly like the interrogation rooms you see on TV shows. Marcus came in with us, along with another officer who introduced himself as Detective Ryan Moreno. He was maybe 40 years old, with a serious face, but kind eyes. "Rachel, I know this has been a terrifying experience, but I need you to tell me everything you know about the person who was following you. Take your time and don't leave anything out, no matter how small it seems." I went through the whole story again, how I'd met Trevor on Bumble 3 weeks ago, the 2 dates we'd gone on, how the second date had felt wrong because of all his invasive questions, how I'd politely declined a third date, and he'd seemed to accept it. I pulled out my phone and showed Detective Moreno our entire text conversation on the app. I gave him Trevor's full name, Trevor James Ashford, and his phone number that was saved in my phone. I described the 2 restaurants where we'd met. I told him about possibly seeing Trevor's car near my gym and my office in the weeks after I'd ended things, but how I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid. Marcus added his account of everything he'd observed, the timeline of when the black SUV appeared, how it had followed us through multiple turns, how the passenger had taken a photo of his license plate, how deliberate and calculated the whole thing seemed. Detective Moreno listened carefully, taking notes on a laptop. Then another officer knocked on the door and came in. "Detective, we got him." Officers stopped the vehicle about 2 miles from here on Riverside Drive. The driver matched the description, and identification confirms it's Trevor James Ashford, age 34, lives in Cedar Park. He's being transported here now for questioning. He paused and looked at me with concern. We also found something relevant. He has an active concealed carry permit. There was a handgun in his vehicle. My entire body went cold. Trevor had a gun. He'd been following me with a gun in his car. What was he planning to do? Detective Moreno's expression stayed calm, but I could see the seriousness in his eyes. "Rachel, did Trevor ever mention owning a weapon? Did you ever see him with a gun during your dates?" I shook my head, feeling like I might throw up. "No, never. He seemed completely normal on the first date, just a regular guy. I had no idea he had a gun." Another officer appeared at the door. "Detective, the subject is here. He's in interrogation room 2. 20 minutes later, I was standing behind a one-way mirror window, looking into another room exactly like the one I'd been sitting in. Trevor was there, sitting at the table, and he looked completely different from the guy I'd had dinner with 3 weeks ago. He seemed agitated, defensive, kept running his hands through his hair. Detective Moreno and another detective went into the room to question him, and I could hear everything through a speaker. "Trevor, we need to talk about what you were doing tonight. Specifically, why were you following Rachel Torres in your vehicle?" Trevor leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms, trying to look casual, but I could see his leg bouncing under the table. "I wasn't following anyone. I was just out driving. It's not illegal to drive on public streets." Detective Moreno placed a folder on the table between them. "You were photographed by multiple traffic cameras making identical turns as the Uber vehicle she was riding in. 7 different turns over a 15-minute period through residential neighborhoods. That's not coincidence, Trevor. That's deliberate tracking. Trevor's face flushed red. Okay, fine. I saw her getting into an Uber downtown when I was driving by. I was just making sure she got home safely. What's wrong with that? I was being a gentleman. The detective's voice stayed level and professional. She's not your girlfriend. She's not your friend. She explicitly told you she didn't want to see you anymore 3 weeks ago. So why would you need to make sure she got home safely? Trevor shifted in his seat, getting more uncomfortable. I was just looking out for her, being nice. She seemed like she'd been drinking and I wanted to make sure nothing happened to her. Detective Moreno opened the folder and pulled out several pieces of paper. We pulled your cell phone location data, Trevor. Your phone has been within 500 feet of Rachel's apartment building 17 times in the past 2 weeks. You've been to her workplace parking lot 9 times. You've searched her name on Google and social media 247 times according to your browser history. This isn't being nice. This is stalking. This is obsessive behavior. I watched the color drain completely from Trevor's face. His casual attitude disappeared. I have the right to go wherever I want. I have the right to look up anyone online. That's not illegal. Detective Moreno pulled out another paper. We also searched your vehicle. We found a notebook in your glove compartment with Rachel's daily schedule written out in detail. Her work hours, 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. The gym she goes to on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evenings. The coffee shop she visits on Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. The grocery store she shops at on Sunday afternoons. How did you get this information, Trevor? Trevor's hands clenched into fists on the table, and his voice got louder, angrier. She led me on. We had 2 great dates. She laughed at all my jokes. She seemed really interested in me. Then she just suddenly cut me off for no reason. She didn't even give me a real explanation. After everything I did to plan those dates and make them special, she just threw me away like I was nothing. Detective Moreno leaned forward. She doesn't need to give you an explanation, Trevor. She's allowed to decide she doesn't want to date you. That's her right. That doesn't give you permission to stalk her, to follow her, to document her every move, to show up near her home and workplace repeatedly. Trevor stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. I wasn't going to hurt her. I just wanted to talk to her face to face, to make her understand that we're good together, that she made a mistake. I was going to wait outside her apartment tonight and just talk to her when she got home. That's all. Just talk. Detective Moreno stood up too, his voice firm and commanding. With a loaded handgun in your vehicle? You were planning to just talk? Trevor's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Detective Moreno walked to the door and called in 2 uniformed officers. Trevor James Ashford, you're under arrest for stalking under Texas Penal Code 42.072. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I watched through the glass as they handcuffed Trevor and read him his full rights. He kept protesting, saying he didn't do anything wrong, that he just cared about me, that I was overreacting. But they led him out of the room anyway. My legs gave out and I had to sit down in the chair behind me. Marcus, who'd been standing next to me the whole time watching through the window, put a hand on my shoulder. He wasn't just going to talk to you, Rachel. Men like him don't follow women for weeks. Don't wait outside their homes with weapons just to have a conversation. You're alive and safe right now because you got into my car tonight instead of driving yourself home. You're safe because I noticed what was happening. That's the only reason this didn't end very differently. Nina arrived at the police station about 2 hours later, and I've never been so happy to see my sister in my entire life. She came running through the door and practically tackled me with the biggest hug I've ever gotten. She was crying and I was crying, and she kept saying over and over, "You're okay. You're safe. I've got you." My parents called my phone at least 5 times in a row before I finally had the strength to answer and tell them what happened. My dad wanted to get in the car immediately and drive up from San Antonio, but I convinced him to wait until morning. My mom was sobbing on the phone, asking how this could happen to her baby. It took me 20 minutes to calm them both down enough to hang up. The police kept me at the station for another hour, taking my full statement and going through every detail of my interactions with Trevor. Then, Detective Moreno came back with information that made my blood run cold. They'd gotten a search warrant for Trevor's apartment in Cedar Park, And what they found there was worse than I could have imagined. He had printed photos of me that he'd taken without my knowledge. Me walking into my gym, me getting coffee on Saturday morning, me leaving my office building. There were screenshots of all my Instagram posts going back months, printed out and organized in a binder. He'd created an actual timeline on poster board tracking my weekly routine with different colored markers. And worst of all, he'd written this creepy journal with entries about me, about us, about the relationship he thought we were supposed to have. He'd convinced himself that we were meant to be together, and my rejection was just a test, or an obstacle he needed to overcome. Detective Moreno explained that following me home that night was supposed to be Trevor's big moment. He was going to show up at my apartment after I got dropped off by the Uber, make it seem like a coincidence that he was in my neighborhood, and try to convince me to give him another chance. He had flowers in his car, red roses, and he had that gun, which he legally owned, but which the police believed he brought for intimidation, or worse, if I didn't respond the way he wanted. The detective told me that in Trevor's twisted mind, he wasn't doing anything wrong. He thought he was fighting for love, being persistent, not giving up on something good. He didn't see himself as a stalker. He saw himself as a romantic. That's what made him so dangerous. I filed for a restraining order the very next day. Nina stayed with me and went to the courthouse with me to fill out all the paperwork. Trevor was charged with stalking, criminal harassment, and unlawful surveillance. His lawyer tried to make it sound like a misunderstanding, like Trevor was just a guy who had feelings and didn't know how to express them properly. But the evidence was overwhelming. The notebook with my schedule, the photos he'd taken, the GPS data from his phone showing he'd been near my apartment and workplace dozens of times, the 247 searches of my name online, the timeline he'd created. All of it painted a clear picture of someone who was obsessed and dangerous. He ended up taking a plea deal to avoid going to trial. He was sentenced to 18 months in county jail, followed by 5 years of probation and mandatory psychological counseling. The restraining order was made permanent, meaning he can never contact me or come within 500 feet of me for the rest of his life. If he violates it even once, he goes straight back to jail. 2 weeks after that night, I moved to a different apartment. I couldn't stay in my old place knowing Trevor had been there so many times, watching, waiting, documenting my life. Nina took time off work and helped me pack everything. We found a new place closer to downtown with a doorman and security cameras everywhere. It cost more money, but I didn't care. I needed to feel safe again. My parents offered to let me move back to San Antonio, but I refused. I wasn't going to let Trevor take away the life I'd built for myself in Austin. He didn't get to win, but I'd be lying if I said everything just went back to normal. It didn't. I still have nightmares sometimes about what could have happened if Marcus hadn't been paying attention that night. I still check over my shoulder constantly when I'm walking alone. I still get nervous when I see a black SUV. I deleted all my dating apps and I haven't been on a date since. Maybe someday I'll be ready to try again. But not yet. The fear doesn't just disappear overnight. Here's what I learned from this nightmare, and this is why I'm sharing my story with all of you. First, always trust your instincts. On that second date with Trevor, my gut was screaming at me that something was wrong. He was asking too many personal questions. He was getting too intense too quickly. I felt uncomfortable, but I ignored it because I didn't want to seem rude or paranoid. Women are taught from childhood to be polite, to be nice, to not make a scene. But being polite can literally get you killed. If someone makes you uncomfortable, you don't owe them anything. Not an explanation, not another chance, not politeness. Just get out of that situation. Second, take threats and weird behavior seriously, even when they seem small. Trevor finding my gym, showing up near my office, these weren't coincidences. They were warning signs that I dismissed because I didn't want to believe someone could be that obsessed after just 2 dates. But obsession doesn't follow logical rules. Some people become dangerous after one rejection. Document everything. Tell people what's happening and report it to the police even if you feel like you're overreacting. And third, there are good people in this world who will help you if you let them. Marcus didn't have to do what he did. He could have just followed the GPS, dropped me off at my apartment, collected his fare, and moved on to his next ride. But he was paying attention. He noticed the black SUV. He recognized the pattern. He trusted his instincts, and he acted to protect a complete stranger. He literally saved my life that night. If this story resonated with you or made you think about your own safety, please hit that subscribe button right now. I share these stories because they matter, because they might help someone recognize the warning signs before it's too late, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I need to know there's a community of people out there who understand how important this is. Marcus and I still keep in touch. He texts me every couple of weeks just to check in and make sure I'm doing okay. I've sent him so many thank you messages I've lost count. Every time I try to tell him he's a hero, he says he was just doing what anyone should do. But we both know that's not true. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Most people wouldn't have acted. Most people would have just followed the GPS and minded their own business. But Marcus saw something wrong, and he chose to get involved, even though it meant making me uncomfortable by locking the doors and changing the route. He chose my safety over my comfort, and that choice saved my life. 3 months after that night, I had to testify at Trevor's sentencing hearing. I walked into that courtroom with Nina holding one hand and my mom holding the other. I stood up in front of the judge and told them exactly what Trevor had done to me, how he'd stolen my sense of security, how he'd made me afraid to go to the gym, afraid to go to work, afraid to exist in my own life, how he'd violated my privacy and my peace, how his obsession had traumatized me in ways I'm still dealing with. Trevor sat there at the defendant's table and didn't look at me once during my entire statement. The judge listened carefully and then gave him the maximum sentence allowed under the plea agreement. When it was over, I walked out of that courtroom holding my head high. Trevor couldn't hurt me anymore. He couldn't follow me or watch me or show up uninvited in my life. He was going to jail, and after that, he'd be on probation with strict conditions. If he ever came near me again, he'd go right back to prison. But even with Trevor locked up, the effects of what he did haven't completely gone away. I'm more careful now about everything. I share my location with Nina every single time I get in an Uber or Lyft. I check the license plate against the app religiously. I pay attention to cars behind me when I'm driving. I notice who's around me when I'm walking to my car. I trust my instincts in ways I never did before. And I've learned that your safety should never be something you feel guilty about prioritizing. You don't owe strangers your personal information. You don't owe anyone who makes you uncomfortable a second chance. You don't owe politeness to someone whose behavior is crossing boundaries. Your comfort and your safety matter more than someone else's feelings. Marcus taught me that it's okay to make people uncomfortable if it means protecting yourself. It's okay to change your route, to lock your doors, to do whatever you need to do to stay safe. I think about what would have happened if I'd driven myself home that night, instead of calling an Uber. Trevor would have followed me directly to my apartment with no witnesses. Or what if I'd gotten a different driver, someone who wasn't paying attention, someone who just followed the GPS without noticing the black SUV behind us? I would have gotten dropped off at my apartment, and Trevor would have been right there waiting with his flowers, and his gun, and his delusions about our relationship. I don't like to think about how that night could have ended, but I know it wouldn't have been good. Your safety is not something you should ever apologize for or feel bad about prioritizing. If a situation feels wrong, remove yourself from it immediately. If someone's behavior is making you uncomfortable, you don't owe them an explanation or another chance. If a stranger tries to help you like Marcus helped me, don't automatically assume the worst. Sometimes the person you least expect is the one who saves your life. Stay aware of your surroundings. Stay safe. Trust your instincts. And remember that there are people out there like Marcus who will protect you if you let them. You never know when you might need someone like that in your life. I'm grateful every single day that I got into the right car that Friday night.